Hey everyone, this is Dr. Belinda Wilkerson, also known as Dr. B from Steps to the Future, coming to you with this week's College Conversations. Thank you so much again, those of you that are joining in. Really love the support. As always, when you check in, make sure that you share this out. I'm looking right now to see us live so that I can share it out to people as we're waiting for people to join us. I am so excited this evening because we have a fabulous guest with us who is going to tell us about a program that she is the founder of that really supports students transitioning to college who have physical conditions or health conditions. And I really want you to listen to this because I don't think we always think about all the challenges of transitioning to college for students from different populations. So with me tonight is going to be Annie Tulkin. Annie is the founder director of Accessible College, LLC. Annie is also get this right, Annie also has a bachelor's degree in secondary education from DePaul University. She has a master's degree in special ed from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and she has a certificate in health coaching from Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. Annie, welcome so much to College Conversations. We really love having you here.
I'm so happy to be here, Belinda.
Thank you. So Annie, tell us a little bit about, so in our world of educational consulting, within one of the associations I belong to, the Independent Educational Consultants Association, we have people that specialize in college, learning disability, grad school. Some people do law school, therapeutics, boarding schools, and what have you. You're one of the few people that I know, or maybe the only one that I know, that actually has this specialty. So tell us a little bit about your organization and what it is that you do.
Sure. So I am the founder and director of Accessible College. Accessible College provides college transition and preparation support for students with physical disabilities and health conditions. And people sometimes ask, what does that mean? What types of health conditions? So I'll elaborate a little bit. So that could be a student who has migraine disorders. It could be a student with epilepsy, someone who has another chronic health condition. It also encompasses students with mental health conditions too. So I work with students with a variety of health conditions and physical disabilities. And when we're talking about physical disabilities, we might be talking about someone who uses a wheelchair or experiences paralysis. And you're right. I think there are a lot of people who work with students on this kind of college transition piece, but there aren't a lot of people like me who focus on students with physical disabilities and health conditions. And so just a little background about me. So I was the associate director of the Academic Resource Center at Georgetown University for about 6 years. In Georgetown, the Academic Resource Center is actually the school's disability support office. And so there I worked with undergraduate, graduate, and medical school students with physical disabilities and health conditions. And that's where I really began to understand that there wasn't a lot of transition support for this specific student population. The students didn't really know what the college accommodations process was like, what they would be expected to do in that process, how they could request accommodations, what types of accommodations they might want to request. And so with Accessible College, that's what we do. We work with students and families one-on-one so that they're asking the right questions, that they're prepared to manage their healthcare once they're on campus independently. And they've thought through some of these pieces prior to getting into college, because we know that students with disabilities drop out at a much higher rate than their non-disabled peers. And so one of the issues could be that preparation piece. And so I really focus with students on figuring out what their individual needs are and tailor what we do with them to that, so that they have, the best platform to be successful once they're in college.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. I wish you were around when I was a high school counselor, because these are the types of services that, as a high school counselor, you not only you working with your kids on getting into college, but you also have your other students, 9 through 11, where you're just trying to make sure they stay in high school and they have the right classes. So we didn't always have the opportunities to learn about what type of services were available on each campus for students. So you would have been somebody that would have been a godsend to counselors now. So do you get an opportunity, before we go on a little bit more about what you do with families, do you get an opportunity to work with professionals like school counselors or other consultants?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of high school, college counselors and guidance counselors, and with independent college consultants as well. And a lot of people will come to me because they're experts at working with the student on the academic fit. They can help students find the right college or the right space academically for that student, but they don't know about what questions to ask about physical accessibility on campus, or what questions to ask about access to medical care in the community. So that's where I can come in and really work with the student and the family to make sure that that family has all of the right tools in their toolbox. So when they're evaluating campuses, they can be asking the right questions. And even earlier on, so I start working with students as early as ninth grade, through graduate school, because a lot of the students I work with who have health conditions and physical disabilities, their parents have been such an integral part of their experience of, life, right? So mom and dad kind of manage a lot of pieces. And so a lot of what I do is calling on that health coaching training that I have to work with students to figure out how can we begin to get you to live a little bit more independently so that you're managing your own medications, so that you know how to get in touch with your doctors, so that you know what conditions you have and you're comfortable talking about them. So that's the kind of like nitty gritty stuff that students need to have in order before they go to school. And a lot of people wait until the end. And I've seen what happens on the other side of the desk at the college, at Georgetown when I was there. And students would come to me in crisis, the middle of the first semester of their freshman year, and it was not a pleasant experience. And so I thought then, why can't we be preparing students earlier on so that they can start to take on some of these pieces so that they're ready when they go to college to be in control of these situations, and if not in control, at least know where to go for help, right? So that's the other piece of that. So that's kind of how I approach this role. I wear my hat of having worked in disability support.
Right.
And then I also acknowledge that I'm not a college consultant. I don't have all of the answers. So I rely on college counselors, school guidance counselors, consultants for that sort of expertise.
Yeah, thank you for that, Annie. For those of you that are just joining us, we're with the founder and director of Accessible College, Annie Tulkin, and she's just giving us some information about the services that she offers and the reasons why she does the work that she does. So please make sure you share this out. Show us some love, so we know that you're out there listening to this and then you're getting some great information. Remember that this is something that it'll be live. It'll be continued, posted on my Facebook page. So please make sure you share it out with folks. So Annie, tell me a little bit about, so when you start working with the student, walk us through the process. So say you start working with someone in 10th grade. Walk us through the process. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I typically do a free 30-minute consultation for anybody who's interested in learning more about my services or thinks that they might need my services. And everything's customized. So I work with the students and the family to figure out where they're at in the process, and then walk with them through that process to figure out, okay, what things do we need to do now, or can we start working on now? And what things can we kind of like put towards the future? What are the critical pieces? For a lot of the students I work with who are in the 9th and 10th grade, I'd say most of that is developing self-advocacy skills, developing independent living skills, and kind of getting them ready and used to having to advocate. Because once they're in college, they have to go into the disability support office, provide that office with documentation, and have a conversation about what their needs are in the college context. So it's very different from high school, where mom and dad are maybe more hands-on and the teachers all know what your accommodations are, and things just kind of happen or fall into place. In college, the student is the one kind of driving that whole experience. And so the student has to be the one who's saying, these are my accommodations. So they're meeting with the people in the disability support office. They're getting their accommodations approved. And then they're going on to have a conversation with each professor every semester about those accommodations. And so that sometimes can be a really tricky experience for students who maybe haven't had to talk about what their needs are, or, what their accommodations are before. And so what I work with them on that early in that 9th, 10th grade period is that self-advocacy piece. And a lot of medication management too, because I'm sure there's probably a parent listening right now who knows that, like, if you're a parent, you're constantly checking in. Did you take your medication? Did you call that doctor? Did you do that thing? There's a lot of check-ins. So some of what I do with students is having these conversations about, how are you setting up your medication management plan? How are you creating accountability for yourself? And it's a coaching model. So we actually work, try something out, see if it works, see if there's a system that we can create, see if there are apps or tools that we can utilize. So I give students advice on that, and create systems for them and with them.
That sounds so good. I mean, that sounds like, all students need some type of organization when they're leaving to go to college. That transition is always, it can be tricky. And I can imagine, as you just explained, for students who have those additional barriers and challenges in their life, having those management skills are so important. So once a student transitions to college, do you still have opportunities to talk with them to see how things are going? So what does it look like once you get to that senior year?
Yep. So I should also say that I'm in the midst of moving to a monthly membership model, which I should be unveiling in the next 2 weeks. People follow that website, which is down there at the bottom. And follow me on Twitter and Facebook for all of these announcements too. But we're moving towards a monthly membership model. And the reason that we're doing that is because I found that if I have more consistency with students and more touch points, then we can actually see the results of these kind of change, processes that we're going through together. So as a student moves into that senior year, it kind of depends on what they've done so far, right? So if they've actually visited or toured any of these campuses or not. For students with physical disabilities, that's a very important piece, because you want to make sure that the campus is actually accessible to you. Every campus is going to tell you that it's ADA compliant, but what that actually means for the user can be really, really different. So ADA compliance is one thing, but usability is another thing for a student who uses a mobility device or a wheelchair or a walker or cane or whatever. And so that's really important piece. So we talk a lot about visiting the campus. And if you're not visiting the campus, or if you are visiting the campus, I help students develop questions to ask the disability support office, because a lot of people don't realize that the disability support process is totally separate from the admissions process. So the admissions department doesn't disclose to anyone else on campus that you have a disability, and the admissions people don't know you have a disability unless you tell them, or unless they can see that you have a physical disability. So all of those pieces are siloed. And so a lot of families don't realize that they should be connecting with the disability support office to at least check the website and see what sorts of services are offered. I usually recommend that people also read the mission statement of the disability support office, because that might give you a sense of how involved are these people going to be with my student, and what care are they going to be using when they're addressing my students' needs, right? And so sometimes you can get a little bit from the mission statement. Sometimes the mission statement of that disability support office will say ADA compliance, 504 compliance, that's it. We provide compliance. Other times it'll be We work with your students and engage them. We we look at things holistically. We work under the ADA and 504. We provide trainings across campus. So it's important to just get a sense of like what these departments' stated mission is. And I usually recommend that people talk to those disability support offices to see if they can be connected with other students on campus who have similar conditions, because that can be the most telling for a student, especially if you can't go and visit in person and you want to know about like the physical accessibility or even the accessibility of course content or academics. Like that can be really helpful to actually talk to a student who's currently there. So that's part of that senior year process, is figuring out what questions are we asking, how are we looking at your school choices. So if you're applying to 15 schools and you need to make sure that you have hospitals and doctors nearby, are we also looking at those pieces too? So there's a lot. It just kind of depends on what the student's needs are, but this is the type of nitty-gritty stuff, like connecting the student with doctors, thinking about transfer and continuity of care. That's the kind of stuff that I do, because I know how important it is.
And that must be such a relief to the parents and to the families that you work with, because just traditional college transition has so many moving parts. And then when you add on all of those pieces. So now that we've moved to a virtual environment for just about everything, what kind of advice would you give to a student that's doing like a virtual admission session? Would you recommend that they do a one-on-one with the admissions person, or maybe see if they can do a one-on-one with the disability services? And how much would they be disclosing during these one-on-ones?
So this is not a diss to admissions people, but admissions people aren't the experts on disability supports on that campus. They might be able to give you a broad overview of what that campus has, but the people in the disability support office are really better equipped to tell you about the types of accommodations and about the process for requesting those accommodations. So the student, a prospective student, can reach out to the disability support office. A lot of disability support offices actually have very thorough and robust websites these days.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on where you are in your college list. Maybe you're doing like a review of 10 websites and then you're only contacting like a handful or your top choices or whatever. I think it's kind of based on the individual's preference and time. But when you're coming down to those final choices, I think it's absolutely imperative that you're contacting the disability support office to either set up a one-on-one conversation. All of those conversations, since they don't have your documentation, they will typically tell you something like, we can't guarantee any accommodations until we've seen your documentation. And so the line of questioning that the student would want to engage in is more of, if you had a student who had Crohn's disease, major depressive disorder, and a visual impairment, what would that look like? Or, like, what kinds of accommodations do you provide with students who have visual impairments or, major depressive disorder, or who use wheelchairs? Can you connect me with other students who have XYZ condition? Can you give examples of the types of challenges that students with XYZ condition have faced receiving accommodations on your campus? And so I work with clients to come up with like customized, tailored questions. And it's actually been a really fun process, because the students will go and ask these questions and then they'll come back and report back to me and engage and kind of see, and they'll like, oh, I asked this college this question and the people gave me this answer, so that was totally different than what this other school gave me, and so that other school is like definitely going to be a better fit for me. And it's very telling. I mean, the types of accommodations can vary from school to school. The ADA requires reasonable accommodations, and how that looks can be different at different places. There are some things that are just blatant violations of the ADA and Section 504, but others where there is a little bit of flexibility, or where a school may have maybe actually engaged in more universal design practices that are just better for everybody. And a student might decide, oh, you know what? Like they actually have a lot of this stuff in place that's going to serve me. So I might choose to go to that school over another school where I have to work harder or wait longer to get, notes or to get some of these things that's built into this other school. So now with everything being virtual,
Yes.
A lot more students are going on like the visit version of campus tours or using other sites to kind of engage. For for physical disabilities, it's so challenging to get a sense of what the actual physical space is without being there on campus. So I think for students who experience physical disabilities, you almost have to connect with other students who have physical disabilities to really get a sense of that. And if they allow people to go and like roam around on the campus right now, like see if you can do that. For other students, it's about contacting the disability support office. It's about contacting student health services. It's about contacting the counseling center to see how many sessions you can have with them before they refer you out to someone in the community, because a lot of students don't realize that the campus mental health services will only see you a few times before they refer you out. And so it's about having those kind of preparatory conversations so that you can make the best decision about where you want to be in school.
Okay, that is so important. I mean, there are so many pieces to this, and I couldn't imagine being a parent, especially with your child being maybe your first child going off to college, and now the college process itself is already pretty high stress at times, and then add in all the other things that you have to do. So one of the things that I was curious about, when students are they have to bring certain documentation depending upon what their condition is. How up to date should that documentation be?
Yeah. So it depends on the condition, and every school has different documentation guidelines. So you can most of them have it listed on their website. So when you're looking at a school, go and check the website and see what their documentation criteria is. For most schools, for learning disabilities, ADD, autism, they'll want a full neuropsychological evaluation that was done within the last 3 to 5 years. Some schools say 3, some schools say 5. They might allow you to get accommodations with a 5-year-old one and tell you that you have to have it updated in that first semester or before the end of the first year. Every school is going to be different on that policy. So you want to make sure that you're looking into that beforehand. The other pieces about having a hearing impairment, a visual impairment, a chronic health condition, a mental health condition, you would bring in a letter of documentation from your healthcare provider. So that outlines what your condition is and what the functional limitations, so the things that you might need on account of having this condition in the academic setting. And most schools have like a letter that you can print out that kind of helps your doctor figure out what they're supposed to write, because quite frankly, doctors don't know about all of these things. And I work with families on this too, on figuring out what types of accommodations you're going to need in the college setting and helping healthcare providers kind of determine what should be in that letter. The other big piece of that is housing. So a lot of people don't realize that you can get housing accommodations too. And there are a lot of conditions that might need housing accommodations. One that comes to mind that came up a lot when I worked at Georgetown was students who had gastrointestinal issues, so Crohn's disease, colitis, IBS, wanting to have a room with a bathroom in it for obvious reasons. Or if you have a medication management thing that you need to do, and you need to do injections or something else where you need privacy, you might want to have a private bathroom and still have a roommate experience. Other students who I've worked with before have had, cancer or migraine disorders or autoimmune disorders that maybe require more quiet space and recovery. And so some of those students choose to apply for a single room. So there's a lot of kind of different things to look at. And then you also have like ADA accessible and having an accessible room for students who use wheelchairs or have other mobility devices too. So there's a whole separate side of accommodations that's not just about classroom and academics. And that also branches out to programmatic accommodations, transportation accommodations, and goes on and on. So I help families and students with all of those things and thinking through all of those pieces.
Right. That is a lot of pieces. Now I think about the times that I visited colleges, and especially when he had been on the campus before. There were quite a few colleges you were surprised at the terrain, how hilly it was, or there were stairs, there were different levels when you're walking around the campus, and you think about, how would a student that maybe was using a wheelchair or had some other condition that impeded their mobility getting around on campus and, getting to class on time and what have you. So tell me about some of the most common, I guess. Well, I don't know, because your caseload would be so individual, but tell me about some of the accommodations that you've worked with students in order to help them understand how to get those accommodations.
So a lot of times what we do is we start with, it depends on where they're at, but we might start with where they were in high school and what accommodations they received there, right? As a starting point. And then figuring out what things are going to change if they go away to college. So do they want to live on campus? Do they want to be, further away from home? So we look at like doctors and different appointments and things. For many of the students that I work with, if we take students who have physical disabilities, for example, a lot of them, some typical accommodations that would not have been typical in a high school setting are things like priority registration. A lot of times people think about that in terms of students who have learning disabilities and like getting in the right classes and good fits for them.
Right.
But for students who have physical disabilities, it might be about finding a class time and making sure they have enough time to get ready in the morning. Because sometimes students with physical disabilities might require more time to get out of bed and get themselves dressed, or if they have a personal care attendant, which is a whole nother topic, Belinda. If they have a personal care attendant who's assisting them or supporting them, it might take them more time to kind of get going in the morning. And then making sure that they have enough time between classes along lines of what you said, getting around that campus. Depending on the campus, it could be Zoom, totally easy, not a problem. Other campuses, the most direct route for someone who uses a wheelchair might be like around the whole campus and through and down an elevator and blah, blah, blah. So making sure that they have enough time. So priority registration is kind of a common one. Classroom relocation can be another issue for students with physical disabilities too. So making sure that their classes are actually in accessible buildings or on the ground level floor, or just thinking through some of those pieces with them. Some of the other things, students with health conditions might need flexible attendance. So if they have a flare-up of their condition, they would work with their professor to make sure that their accommodation for that flexible attendance is adhered to. That can be sometimes a challenging one because, some faculty might feel like if you've missed too many classes that you're unable to kind of keep up with the content of that course. So it's super important to be having these conversations with the Disability Support Office too, but the flexible attendance, extensions on assignments. A lot of students who have chronic health conditions, if you've ever experienced a health condition where you just felt like you can't do anything, so there are students who feel that way a lot, right? They are totally unable to do work while they are sick. If you have a migraine disorder, you literally cannot look at that computer screen when you're experiencing a migraine. So you might need extensions to complete the paper or something like that. And so we work with students to figure out what are your needs based on your condition, what are those functional limitations, and what accommodations are going to be, the most helpful and the most reasonable for that condition. And then how do you advocate for that? How do you talk about what your needs are? Because that's probably the trickiest part, I think. And I think it's also the most exhausting part for students as well, because even once you have the accommodation, you're constantly having to re-advocate for that accommodation. So I talk a lot with students about self-care and fatigue. And I connect students with a lot of other, disability organizations and people with disabilities, too, to have these kind of in-group conversations too that aren't happening in a lot of spaces, but are happening in the disability community, thankfully.
That's such a wealth of information about this because, like I said, parents just trying to get ready for college and then trying to do it in this COVID era is absolutely crazy. And I just love the way that you're able to individualize based upon what the student needs. And also when looking at colleges, probably the two most common words in the college search is "it depends," because every college has its own way of doing things. One's disability services may be called by a different name, so it's really important that students know what is the correct office they need to go to. So having you as a guide through all of that is absolutely great. And plus the fact when you just talked about self-advocacy. Oh my God, that's a skill. That's a skill all college students need. But students that need that extra step and having them practice how to do it beforehand is so crucial to their success. So, I'm sure that parents are just absolutely thrilled when they find your services. So I'm hoping that, people learn more about you and understand that this is a service that is available to people. So for folks that might just be joining in, we're with Annie Tulkin, who is the founder and director of Accessible College, LLC, where she works with students who are transitioning to college. And these students may have physical conditions or other health conditions that may limit them transitioning as traditional students do. So Annie, tell me a little bit about this wonderful, absolutely wonderful partnership that you have coming up with the pretty well-known foundation.
Yeah, it's super, super exciting. And it just got announced last week, so it's kind of hot off the presses, I guess. So I have a partnership with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and the partnership allows me to work with students who have paralysis through the Reeve Foundation, and the Reeve Foundation will pay for a certain number of sessions with me to work with that student. So essentially the student gets my services and it's through the Reeve Foundation. We're doing a webinar the 28th. I see it on the bottom of the screen there. So
shorten the URL a little bit, yeah. So needed to do it. But folks, if you don't get it now, it will definitely be, you can always look at this again. And this will also be, the full URL will be in the show notes.
Yeah, and so with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, in that webinar on the 28th, we will outline like kind of what the process is for students who have paralysis and want to work with me, how they can do that. And it's super, super important because, we know that students with disabilities make up about 19% of the undergraduate population in the United States, which is huge. We also know that people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the United States. And students who have mobility impairments make up about 7% of the undergraduate population of students with disabilities. So it's going to be really, really interesting to connect and work with students and families through the Reeve Foundation to provide them with this kind of guidance and support. I also worked on a transition booklet that the Reeve Foundation is going to be putting out soon. So it's kind of like a coming up soon. And that'll be available on their website as well, so that students with, any type of paralysis or mobility impairment can use that guide to kind of walk them through the transition process too. But for students who are interested in learning more about the free service that I'm going to be doing through the Reeve Foundation, check out this webinar on the 28th. It's also going to be recorded, so if you miss it, you can watch it later, and it'll have all the information on how to contact the Reeve Foundation to sign up for this service. So I'm really, really excited about it. It's such a huge honor to be working with the Reeve Foundation on this. It's so important. We talk a lot in the disability community. We talk about a lot about disability and employment. And I think the kind of missing piece here is getting students into college and through college so that they can enter into the employment setting. And so I'm really happy to be a part of this project. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thrilled. I was reading the announcement, and I said, "Oh, look at Annie! This is so great. It is such an important opportunity. It's so important for people to be able to have this opportunity to have this service, and the fact that the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation are supporting this work is absolutely fabulous. So, folks, if you know a student who may benefit from these services, but you're not quite sure what it all entails, please make sure you watch this webinar. It's September 28th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you get the time zone right, where you can learn more about the program. So there's a shortened URL here on the screen, but you can also go back to Annie's website, accessiblecollege.com, and all of the information will be there for you also. But please take advantage of this. And if this isn't something that your family could use, please make sure you share it with other families. Put it out to your other networks. Because again, we're all in this together. And when one student succeeds, we all succeed. So really, pass this information along. So tell me a little bit about another event that you have coming up.
Yeah, I'm busy these days.
You are.
I am doing a Twitter chat for those of you who are to Twitter on Wednesday, the 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern with a fantastic college consultant, Judy Bass. And she runs Bass Educational Services. And she focuses on students who have learning disabilities and who are neurodiverse. And we work together a lot because we actually live in the same area. So we see each other and we co-present sometimes. But our partnership is great because Judy's a real expert on the different types of college resources and programs specifically for students who are neurodiverse or autistic or have learning disabilities. And she also works with some students who have health conditions as well. And she coaches people through that college process, including some of the transition pieces too. And then I bring in this kind of rich knowledge about the physical disabilities and health conditions. And so we're going to be talking about just generally preparing for college with a disability, types of things that students and parents should be thinking about, should be looking at, the types of questions you should be asking as you're engaging in that process. And the hashtag for that, for you Twitter folks who might want to join it, is hashtag Disability College Prep. So that's on September 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. It'll be a really good conversation. If you can't make the conversation when we're having it live, you can also search the hashtag after the conversation and see what was said, because we're going to be sharing a lot of resources. And we usually have a lot of different guests who are also experts in this area who kind of join on and share some of their resources and their knowledge as well. So that should be a really great conversation too. I'm really looking forward to that one.
That sounds so excellent. So folks, you have several ways to learn more about the work that Annie does, with this Twitter chat. Now, it's funny because I've done a few Twitter chats, not personally, but where I followed and participated in them. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of cool, now that I've kind of gotten the hang of it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to jump in on this one, or at least follow along. September 23rd is my birthday, and I was actually saying, okay, I'm going to take the day off from work. Well, that's not going to happen. So I will still be working on my birthday, but that's okay because I'll celebrate later.
So grab a piece of cake and join us in the Twitter chat.
Cake and ice cream and start with the Twitter at the same time. So folks, you've got this Twitter chat opportunity, and you also have the webinar opportunity. So please make sure you take advantage of these. Please make sure you pass these along to people within your network or in your community. Those of you that are on group Facebook pages, I'm sure that there may be a family that's in your group that may need these services, or know of someone that needs these services, or you're just not sure. So make sure you just have it there in your toolkit, so that if you do run into somebody that needs these services, you can certainly share this with them. So Annie, tell me a little bit about, so if someone wanted to do the type of work that you do, what would you recommend to them as far as what they need to do to prepare?
That's a really interesting question. Nobody's asked me that question before. That's surprising. So I think the kind of tricky part here is that you don't really know what the college process is like from a disability perspective unless you've worked at a college in a disability support office. And I say that because, like, most of my colleagues who work in disability support offices are in situations where there's probably not a lot of staff, and there's a lot of hands-on with students, and it's a really tricky job, and you have to juggle a lot of pieces. I think that for me, my background is in special education. That was my master's. I had worked in disability-related nonprofits and in federal government roles related to disability and employment prior to starting Accessible College. And then, I didn't have any background in higher education. And I was lucky enough to start at Georgetown and get that experience on the ground there. That was the best learning experience for this job for me, was really seeing the students who were coming into that office and understanding that they didn't know what they should be asking for. And nobody had had conversations with them prior to that about, what it would look like or feel like to be in college with XYZ chronic health condition. There's also this other piece that, some of the students that I was working with, they maybe had a 504 plan in high school, but students with 504 plan, they don't get any transition support services as a part of that, transitioning out of high school. So unless someone's having an intentional conversation with them about what their needs might be, they don't really know. So I would say, a great way to learn about disability in general is to engage the disability community, especially on Twitter. There's a whole disability academic Twitter feed that will get kind of people up to speed about the things that students are experiencing in these classrooms and in academic situations. And they're really quite frustrating experiences. The things that people share are not always, rainbows and sunshine. And that really helps you get a perspective and an understanding. I would also, if you're interested in reading more about disability in general, there's a project called the Disability Visibility Project.
Could you say that name again?
Sure, it's Disability Visibility Project. And I can put this in the Facebook, or I'll send it to you in the chat right now, and then you can post it.
Disability Visibility Project.
Yeah, and so it's a fantastic project because it has a podcast, it has narratives, it has everything, where you can really start to learn a little bit more about people who experience disabilities, every day in every scenario in their lives, and kind of what those experiences have been like, because that helps us all be a little bit more empathetic and understanding. And so that's kind of good training, I think, for me all the time. I read things like that. I engage, with the disability community, and I also listen to lots of podcasts too. So once you go down this rabbit hole, there's so much to learn. But I think the biggest thing is like understanding the experience of students. And there's a lot of students who are writing or have written about what their college experience was like with their condition. And that's a really great way to learn about the types of needs and things that might be helpful to the next student, right? So there's a lot of lessons kind of learned out there that can be really informative.
Oh, I'm so glad I learned about this resource, because this year I'm actually the college supervisor for 19 school counseling interns at Providence College. So I'm always looking for resources that are going to help them in their work, practical resources. So now that you told me about this, I have a feeling I'll be going down that rabbit hole a little bit, so I can look at it and pass it on to them.
Yeah, I mean, fun fact. So this year was the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act in July. So 30 years have gone by. There's a lot of things that people kind of take for granted in their day-to-day lives that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the ADA. So things like curb cuts when you're walking down the street and there's that little dip. Which is great for everyone. It's great for grandma. It's great for parents with strollers. It's good for people who use wheelchairs. So there's a lot of things in our lives, Braille, tactile numbers and elevators, building standards. Like the ADA has impacted a lot of the physical access of our lives. And it's also made education and employment more accessible to people with disabilities. And so around the 30th anniversary of the ADA, there's just been like kind of a resurgence of information and books and things that are coming out. There's a great one that was on Netflix, a documentary called Crip Camp.
I haven't watched that yet. I keep hearing about it.
You have to see it. It's so good. And it is a Netflix documentary about this group who goes to this Camp Jened, which is in upstate New York, and it's all people with disabilities. And it kind of chronicles the disability rights movement coming from all of these young activists getting together and having these conversations and engaging, leading all the way to the passage of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which is a non-discrimination act, and then all the way up to the ADA. And so there's a woman who's a huge part of this, Judy Heumann, and she wrote a book that is out now too. I feel like I'm doing a book launch for everybody. But her book is called Being Human, and it's fantastic too. And if you Google her, she's been doing tons of interviews. And she is just a phenomenal person. She worked in the Obama administration, in the State Department, like advocating for disability rights across the country and across the world. So that's another great kind of way to learn more about the disability rights movement.
And her name again was?
Judy Heumann. It's Huemann, and I'm going to put that in the chat, and then I'm going to double check it on the internet.
Okay. Sounds great. That sounds great. Okay, so let me put that in there. So folks, this is definitely something. I mean, we're getting fantastic information here, and I hope all of you are taking notes or knowing that you're going to look at this later. So you want to look for the book by Judy Heumann, because that will give you an opportunity. Did I spell it right?
Yeah, I'm looking too. So.
Okay.
Here's a link to her book, and it's I reversed two letters, so it's Humann. Yeah, okay. I was so close.
All right, let's put this link up here, folks, and we'll get this up here, because it's one of the things I love about being able to do this is that we're able to share different resources with people, and it's so important because you don't really know about these resources otherwise.
Yep. You don't know what you don't know, right? And there's a lot to learn.
Here's a link to her book. So please make sure you check that out. And speaking of books, I just want to share. You guys know me. I always have to share a book, regardless of what the topic is. So this evening's book, so I really have never done a children's book. So this evening, I'm actually going to talk about just a little bit about this book. It's a kid's book about belonging, and it's by Kevin Carroll, and it's a series of books that he writes, a kid's book about, and it's all these different topics. But in this day and age where we worry a lot about bullying and other things, and with students that are able, disabled, whatever the situation, it's always important that students feel like they belong. And this is such a cute book. It's it's geared for younger students. And one of the things I really love in the beginning, it says, "Better together. This book is best read together, grown up and kid." So this isn't a book that you don't want to just hand off to a child. You want to have the opportunity to sit there and have a conversation with them. So a kid's book about belonging by Kevin Carroll. So I would definitely recommend this for people to read. So Annie, what last words, or what advice would you want to give to families with students that may need this type of help in transitioning to college?
Yeah. Start early. That is like the best pro tip that I can give. And mostly because, if you can start early with your student and working on these skills and getting these things in place, they might have more success once they're in college. And so I think the other piece of advice too is going back to what I just said a moment ago. You don't know what you don't know. And it's okay not to know everything, but then the next step there would be to ask the right people, to engage, figure out what types of things do I need to figure out before the student goes to college, to make sure that they have a smooth transition. And that's where people like me and like Belinda can come in handy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Annie. This was wonderful because I learned so much, because I know that as I said before, as a school counselor, we didn't have this information, and we didn't always know how to access this information. And websites weren't as robust as they are today. I mean,
Yep.
I'm talking back in the day, our technology has certainly improved a lot so that school counselors have access to all kinds of online resources. But I love what I've learned. Like I said, that disability visibility project, I will be all over that. And I hope to, I did already sign up for the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation webinar. So I did sign up for that already. And I hope to be at the Twitter chat. So for those of you that, are catching this at the end, this is Annie Tulkin, who is the founder and director of Accessible College. This is her website on the screen, so please check it out. On her website, you will find information about an upcoming webinar about her partnership with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And then you will also see the information for a Twitter chat that she has coming up. So check that out. And she also has a great blog. I was reading the blog articles and learning some more information. And you can also go on her website and sign up for her newsletter so that you never miss out on anything that's coming out. So please, folks, make sure you do that. Annie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to pass this information on to people, and especially my school counseling interns. They say, "Oh my God, you're always bringing us something," but it's practical stuff that they can use. So again, thank you so much with this.
Thank you, Belinda. I really enjoyed this time tonight. And if people have questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, and again, if you want to email her, this is Annie's email, so you can just send an email to info@accessiblecollege.com.
Yep.
Folks, please tune in next week for another College Conversations, where we will be talking about finding your people when you get on a college campus. And I'm actually really thrilled about next week, because I will have a group of 5 of my closest colleagues with me, and we will talk about how we found each other and how we think that will help people and help students as they transition to college. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. This is Dr. B from Steps to the Future, and I will see you next Monday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for joining.